Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of The Headhunter. My name is Laban Cliff. As I said, do you know there are folks who just don't apply for jobs? They are hunted. And how do you get yourself on the hunters list? That's what we're going to tell you, and a lot more on this episode, and many more, of course, on our Headhunter series. Today, we have an exciting guest. I must say, one you, of course, have seen, read about, a gentleman who I look up to as well, having known him from many years back. This is none other than Mike Eldon. Take a look at his profile. Okay, speaking of which, a man I've known many years back, and this was out in a team building session. No, wait, in fact, before the team building session, it was during a leadership program targeted to the youth. We called it Uongozi Bora. Mike, you really touched many lives, especially just trying to develop that leadership, creativity, strategy bit. I think I'm one person who can attest to that. What inspired you to actually first, inspire this young crop of leaders through the Uongozi Bora program?
Well, we did this through our organization, which, as you know, stands for the Dan Eldon Place of Tomorrow. And Dan was my son, and I say was because sadly, as you know again, he was killed in Somalia in 1993. He was a Reuters photojournalist then, and he was killed with three others, two wonderful Kenyans and a young German man. And I set this up, the depot, as a living memorial to him. And we started as a center for outdoor experiential learning for young people. And we started with entities like Starehe Boys Center and Aga Khan Academy. These were our first clients doing this outdoor, what we call team building now. It worked so well to develop self-confidence, communication skills, leadership, many, many different things. And this idea for Uongozi Bora was one of these. And we got wonderful support from the Ford Foundation over several years. We had different cohorts where, as you remember, it was leadership and citizenship. But it was also very much to do with self-exploration, which is very much of a missing component then and now in people's development. This is why most people don't produce good CVs, because they don't know what's there to be sold, to be offered.
Great, but let's look at also the conversation now at a corporate level. You've taken time as a management consultant to really advise corporates on this leadership strategy, creativity, and just the bit about infusing I want to talk about the strategy bit first before we get the culture. So how has it gone? Because you've had very good clients, I must say. I think, the blue chip companies of this world. Take us through that, and what solutions do you provide to corporate leaders?
The first thing to say is that through the depot, we evolved from only dealing with young people to dealing with organizations. Because what we found is that what we were doing with youth worked just as well at any level, including the highest. And so we started these culture strengthening programs. One of our very first clients was the Treasury, when Martin Odor was part of the Dream Team. Yes. And I had known Martin when he was the chairman of ISPAC. I was the chairman of Kenya Institute of Management. Yeah. And when he was appointed, I asked him, Martin, is there anything we can do? And we were there with him for 18 months on a culture transformation program for the Treasury, for the whole Treasury, not just in Nairobi. And we developed change champions, and all this in support of Martin's wonderful aspirations, ambitions for the Treasury to flatten the organizational pyramid, which is nowhere steeper than in the Treasury, never mind in those days. And to have energy, instead of flowing inwards and being sucked up, to flow downwards and outwards to the citizens, to the beneficiaries. And we've worked a lot with the World Bank, for instance,
Yeah.
and through them working with governors and deputy governors and county governments, and not just in this country, to, we call it energy alignment.
Across all levels.
Across levels
Yes, yes.
and across functions.
Okay.
Between head office and field officers, between silos, functional silos, between back office and front office.
Yeah.
And our work revolves very much about that in a strategic context.
So Mike, and I know, of course, as a management consultant, we'll all look up to the good man, Peter Drucker, who said, culture, it's strategy for breakfast. Just break it down for us, especially in a Kenyan context and with the clients you deal with and do the work that you do.
Yeah, I don't see that much of a Kenyan context because this business of culture and people is timeless and global.
Yeah.
And I love that phrase of Peter Drucker's.
Yeah.
Because what it means is that you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you do not have a healthy culture to support it, you may as well not have bothered.
Yeah.
Equally,
Yeah.
if you have a very strong culture, you don't even need that brilliant a strategy maybe.
Yeah.
Having said that,
Yeah.
I have thought so much about this culture eats strategy for breakfast statement, and I prefer an amendment to it, which is that a strategy component on culture must be integrated into overall strategy
Oh,
development.
that's interesting. Because it's always deemed to be a side. So you have your strategy and then you just have
And
this
if you look at this concept called the balanced scorecard,
yeah.
where you have basically these 4 quadrants of customers and products and your brand, and you have our people, that's where the culture is.
Yeah.
And then you have systems and processes and financial sustainability. The balanced scorecard terminology for our people is learning and growth, which is a nice way of expressing it, but I still prefer our people. So when you look at our people, what is that about?
Yeah.
It's about talent management, and within all of that and surrounding it and infusing it is culture, which is all to do with the values. And the values influence attitudes, and attitudes influence behavior, which is what is observable. Behavior is a reflection of attitudes and values. And then the question is, so how do you develop a culture strategy? How do you develop an our people strategy in this element of
Especially
culture?
at the onset, so that it's not really like a by the way, to have it
Yes.
embedded.
Yes,
You know?
it's as significant, and this is why you have to have the chief talent officer or HR officer, whatever, with a seat at the top table, which too often has not been the case, but increasingly is, to reflect how vital it's always been, but more than ever with knowledge workers and this mobility of people, the big resignation and all of these things, home working, unless you have the right culture, you won't do well. And in my personal experience, where I'm a director and where I do my consultancy, it's clear that those organizations that came into these COVID times with a healthy culture, where people trust each other, where senior people empower and delegate, and things happen at the lowest possible level, they're the ones who did well. They're the ones who increased market share.
At a time when there was great job losses and you have...
Yes.
You know,
And partly it was because they were more than fair to their people, appreciating that it wasn't just this cliche about being the most important asset. It actually was. So where I'm a director, that is how it is. And that's why I've agreed to be a director in such companies, and I wouldn't agree to be a director in companies where this wasn't the case.
I was actually having a chat with colleagues in the industry. It's more the Chief of Staff Association. And there was a conversation about immigration and really the learnings you get from managing a diverse workforce. the three things that came out was more on talent, innovation, and capital. Just seeing how that is so critical to organizations, perhaps that are managing a global workforce. It was interesting to see that talent and innovation, especially that, at this point in time, is so critical. Where you're having a lot of movement in terms of, how do you innovate, how do you stay ahead and stuff like that. But having that bit about culture being infused, because I feel like in those two, especially in the talent and innovation bit, because you can't innovate if the culture doesn't support innovation.
Yeah. Many organizations, of course, have innovation as one of their values. And usually, as I run my activities with clients, they confess it's the one that's perhaps least well lived. Why? Because of the culture. So the question is, how do you stimulate creativity and the sharing of ideas from your people within a culture that genuinely seeks that and makes use of the ideas that come? At Davis and Churchliff, where I'm a director, we now have a particular program to stimulate coming up with ideas about the digitization, about so many other things, to take advantage of particularly the young people, not just to have their voice heard and to give them responsibility, but to have their ideas listened to and acted on.
And not just as lip service, to actually take a concise effort to implement.
This has been very much part of the philosophy of Kaizen, this Japanese-initiated approach to continuous improvement and reduction of waste and lean working. And part of it is bringing the workers at all levels together to come up with their ideas. The people on the shop floor, in the front office dealing with customers, and also to bring the senior management to those front offices into the shop floor to listen to the voice of the people about ideas not just to do with better product or saving money or getting customers, but strengthening the cultures, building trust, the culture stuff.
Looking at it from a Kenyan context, seeing where the problem is, and to those leaders, the business leaders, the entrepreneurs who are watching us, and they really want to get tips on how they can actually help the organization.
So many things take me back to trust. Where you have trust, so much is possible, and where you don't, so much is not possible. So then the question is, are your people trustworthy? Did you attract people who are? Did you reward, recognize, promote people who are? Did you penalize those who are not? Are you trustworthy? That's where it must start. And where you develop a culture of trust and openness, all these things are possible. But if you think, oh, well, we're here in Kenya, everyone's a thief, everyone's cheating, everyone's bribing, then it can't work. But what such people don't realize is that you avoid certain risks by not trusting anyone, but you also avoid massive opportunities, because if I am trustworthy, actually, but you think I'm not amused. I get disengaged. I probably leave. And that's why I said earlier that coming into COVID, with people working from home, remotely, etc., rather than being there so you can micromanage them, and the presenteeism of making sure they clock in on time, etc. These are the contrasts between contemporary organizations that are and will be doing well, and those that hold on to this control and Kenyans are lazy and corrupt and so forth.
Great. So Mike, this is just your management tidbits. to especially C-suite level. If you're speaking to a CEO of a company right now and they're just grappling those issues, what are the top 3 pointers you'd give them to just how to manage this whole animal of culture and strategy?
How are you viewing your people? Do you have parent-child relationships with them? Never mind stern parent, naughty child relationships. Or do you have adult-adult relationships of mutual respect, where you assume that people who've been attracted to your organization have something to offer, and that you don't know it all? And the phrase I really love that I came across recently in this wonderful book, Think Again, by Adam Grant, is confident humility. So that I'm confident enough to know what I don't know. And Professor Edgar Schein, this wonderful, he's in his 90s now, former MIT professor, has written books about humility and asking more than telling, including and not least board members. Instead of lecturing and pontificating to management and then finding out that what you are telling them to do they've already been doing, or they tried it and it didn't work, to ask respectfully. I think this sums up my current thinking about good leadership, not just now, before too, but particularly now, to flatten that pyramid, to give people a voice and to be less efficient with your time, thereby being more effective.
It's very interesting you mentioned that, because we might assume that it's just a management problem, but if you also don't have the blessing or the guidance from the board, it becomes a bit difficult. If you also don't have a board that is looking towards how do you get better. You know?
Yes, you have guidance from the board, but not pontification, not directives, not instructions. And so there is that, again, adult-adult relationship between management and the board. And a lot of our work involves board management alignment, or board alignment between the chairman, chairwoman, and fellow directors, and between them and the CEO, particularly, above all, between the chairperson and the CEO. That is the most critical success factor. And when I have been, and where I am now a chairman, I know that if that doesn't work, you're in deep trouble.
How is that? Just explain that. Because you'd feel like maybe the rest of the team just need to talk to the CEO. Why that chairman CEO?
Well, first of all, it's the chairman who does the performance review, the appraisal of the CEO. And there has to be that kind of a coaching relationship between the chairman and the CEO, the development, the giving of constructive feedback so that the CEO can do the best possible job to be at their best. When I was chairman of the council of KCA University, I had that relationship with my vice chancellor. And we worked as a team to then help him build his senior management team, and then the next levels, and the student council leaders and so forth. All adult type stuff. Mutual respect, all part of the same team, not pushing against each other in zero-sum games, like politicians do and have to. So this aligning of energy is important. And the symbols of it, the central focal points in an organization are between the chairperson and the CEO. And so the chairperson builds consensus around the board, the CEO around the senior management team, and cascading downwards. But it's through these two individuals. And equally, the board engagement shouldn't only be with the CEO, and shouldn't only be with the senior management team. The more the board is exposed to other people, away from head office at other levels, the more they get a real sense of what's going on, which is again requiring trust. That the CEO doesn't think that people are going to squeal to the board about them, that it's not going to be a gossip thing, protection, revenge, all this sort of nonsense, so that everyone knows everyone and can contribute to a common vision and living common values.
Great. Mike, before I let you go, I think to our viewers, I think it's great to have you on board as well, or get wherever you're tuned from, of course, on TV or on our social media platforms. What the Headhunter focuses to do is really get you ahead of the game in terms of your leadership skills, in terms of your management, influencing also your management style, of course, to that entrepreneur and that employee, wherever you may be watching us from. There's also a keen need towards conversing to the diaspora, and particularly investors who are keen to come back and invest back home. And I know we've not touched a bit on that, but you can quickly mention this whole the startup generation. We're seeing a lot of companies setting up shop in Nairobi. Nairobi is greatly becoming a hub for investments into the larger East African region. To that person who doesn't even have a headwind or a roadmap into how it is doing business here, what would you tell them in terms of just that getting ahead of their management style in managing?
Well, yes, and people who've lived in Britain or America, Australia, or wherever for some years come back here and they suffer from what's called reverse culture shock of being in a low trust society.
Yeah.
And wondering how to deal with it. So they need help. They need coaching to reintegrate into the realities of the culture here, whilst holding on to whatever values they absorbed where they had been. And we have so many healthy subcultures here. So the question is how to link up with other people who are like that, not just other diaspora returnees, but people who've been here all along, but who defied this low trust expectation and who have built great organizations because they're outliers in having built high trust organizations.
Yeah. Well, that's it for the Headhunters show. But before I let Mike go, there's a conversation regarding what's next. You said now you're on board leadership as well. How is it? How's that going? And then maybe you can tell us, should we be expecting another Wongo Zibora, for instance? And how are you foreseeing the future looking like, particularly for Mike Eldon?
This business of people and culture and values, as I said, is timeless. It's universal. And there will always be a need for it. And there'll always be a whole spectrum between role models and awful characters taking shortcuts and not trusting and so forth. And so our job is to pull people towards that end of the spectrum, to nudge them, to tickle them. Because our whole approach as we do our work is the expectation, the full expectation, that with them we will have a good time doing good things. And not either one or the other, but the two tumbling around together. So this light touch is important. And in many ways, there's no better place to do that than here in Kenya, where people are so energetic, curious, exposed, vibrant. And so that will continue. That will not change. The election will come and go. 2030 vision will come and go. We're beginning to think about post-vision 2030. And Kenya will continue doing better than most, but not as well as it should, until we get to grips with more clients.
That will happen. This is an election year, as I would say. Any expectations? What are you seeing? Being a political leader, of course, there's always that jittery of some sorts.
Well, yes.
What are you hearing from
so much of energy and money is distracted towards all this non-stop expensive campaigning. But there will be a Kenya after August. And I'd like to think that the different authorities who are charged with ensuring a peaceful build-up to and through the election are better organized and better coordinated than before. I do quite a bit of work with the National Cohesion Integration Commission, and I like how they are collaborating with others, that they are not silos. And that's the important thing, this collaboration, this synergy. And I think that gives us some scope for more optimism than we might have felt in previous elections. But the people who most need influencing to keep things cool and policy focused, the politicians are the least influenceable.
Great. We've gotten many tips from you, Mike, but I'm going to give you just about 30 seconds to give your parting shot. I think you can look at this camera and just, give your parting shot as a management consultant, par excellence, respected. I would want to hear your views and your parting shot to, especially the leadership of this private sector companies and startups, and the business leaders into how they can get ahead.
I think that even without COVID, but never mind with COVID, this concept of agility is more vital than ever. We talk about this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world, VUCA. But what I like is what I came across, which is VUCA 2, which instead of looking at, how awful it is because of all of this uncertainty, we look at how to handle it and thrive within it, which is, visualize the vision, understand, look at the data and all of this, the C, lots of good C words, communicate, collaborate, consult, and so forth, and A's for agile and adapt.
Great.
So if you think of those 4 words in the context of the volatile, uncertain type words, that's what we need, and that's whether you're a tiny organization or a huge corporate, whether you're a parastatal or a ministry or an NGO, that's what we have to do. So we're not constrained by undue compliance and regulation and bureaucracy, but we're able to move as we need to, which again requires empowerment, delegation, and I'll use my word again as the final word, trust.
Mike Eldon, management consultant from the Depot, Kenya. Thank you so much. I feel like we should just have continue, but of course, in view of time, we have to pause for now, and we hope to have you at the Headhunters show again.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks.
Has been Mike Eldon with us. Great insights. You can catch this only on the Headhunters show on KTN Home, and a lot more, of course, on our Standard Group digital platforms. It's goodbye for now. See you again next time.